welcome back to the Futurist New Deal podcast. I'm here with Bionic Dance Channel's Kate Farr. It's cool to sit down with you because I mean, you know, I've just enjoyed your material and what kind of jokes and conversations that have transpired between us in the past. So I'm going to post us hi.
Hello. And I have to say, it's always good to put a face to the username. I mean, I've bumped into people on the street from time to time who've recognized me from the YouTube channel or that time I was on Tosh.0. And I mean, the number of people who try to treat you when you're a YouTuber like you're some sort of weird celebrity, I'm like, no, I'm just folks. Treat me like just folks. Seriously, I want to know who you are so that the next time I see you in my comments section, I know, it's that person, not just that name, not just that username, but that's the person I met that time. You know, it's just, I like having that connection. I'll never understand people where they're like, they put out their YouTube videos and then never interact. You know, you never see them respond to anybody else's comments or anything. They just hold themselves aloof. I don't get that. I couldn't do it, you know?
It's hard. People are sometimes getting just hateful comments or things. Some people have even the people who do interact. They're having a personal assistant actually doing some of that, so they can be at some remove from it. But yeah, I don't understand it either. There's a whole host of questions there as well, like the durability of your online persona. And do you think that we should tend to expect people to have be using the same persona through the years and across the platforms and so forth, or do you think it's okay to be a little looser with that?
Well, I mean, there are definitely people out there where their online self is a role they're playing, where it's you know, they're an actor, they're playing a character kind of thing, even when it's not fiction. You know, and there are definitely people out there where it's like in their YouTube video, they're totally manic and upbeat and all of that stuff, and then you meet them in person, and they're like, hi. You know, as it's just kind of weird. I try to be as genuine as possible online, but then again, I mean, there's that line of people who get it and people who don't. Because like I'll be told fairly often that when people are reading text, they can hear it as if I'm speaking it. But then there's other people where maybe they don't know me as well, and they interpret what I've written in the worst way possible. You know, I mean, I've had that where people have read what I've written, where I would be saying it if I was saying it like vocally in this tone of voice. I'd be saying it like this, where they see it as this because I hate you and everything. And I'm like, dude, that's not how I meant that. Like at all. I'm not up in your face the way you think I am. It's just, it's weird. So I try to be as genuine as possible, just so that when people do read what I write back to them, they know what they're getting. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think you certainly come off as a straight shooter, just as you know, as a forward person in your persona.
I do my best.
But many a romantic relationship certainly has been confounded by this confusion via text message of whether something was sarcastic or not. Or
and I have to admit, there are certain platforms online that do not give you any text formatting options. Like, thankfully, with YouTube, if you put underscores around something, it's italics. If you put asterisks around it, it's boldface, which is great. But on Facebook, you don't have that. And so I admit, if I want to emphasize a word, I will type it in capitals, which people interpret as yelling, which they're not supposed to do. I know a lot of people are like, yeah, okay, all caps means yelling, but I'm sorry, if you don't have access to italics, what else are you supposed to do? I'm just saying.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
So I implore the makers of Facebook, include text formatting, you bastards. But that's just me.
Yeah. There is a lot of limitations on some platforms, and Facebook is definitely one of them. Facebook has definitely been push people to have that more durable identity as well, and that literally kind of set the stage for the Cambridge Analytica type problems. And there's articles people are writing that say, just don't use your real name and don't give too much real information, like be feeding misinformation to this beast if you want to circumvent these kinds of problems with big data manipulators and so forth. It's kind of a weird scene.
I've been trying to think how someone might use any of my online data to screw with me. I mean, not necessarily maliciously, like if there's someone on YouTube that really, really hates me and they dox me or track me down or something. I don't mean like that. I mean like a company or the government or something. Yeah. I've been trying to think of what I could possibly have done that they could use against me in some way and how. And I haven't really been able to come up with anything. Just nothing pops into my head on that one. I don't know. Maybe I'm overlooking something. I'm probably overlooking something, but still.
Yeah. Well, some of it's a game of inches. Large concerns are able to leverage entire communities. It doesn't necessarily affect me personally that badly, but they have enough metadata on everyone that they're able to swing elections and so forth. But they didn't personally steal my identity and use it to go on a crazy joyride or something.
Right. Yeah. I have a lot of friends on Facebook who make every post private, and I'm like, really? Because that meme with the kitten in it is not really something you need to keep private. I'm just saying, I'm pretty sure you're safe if you post the kitten meme publicly. Yeah, it's not some big CIA secret where hidden in this picture are the launch codes or something. That's not going to happen. It's just a picture of a kitten. I don't know.
In the pre-interview, we were talking about two ideas about the metaverse, augmented reality and virtual reality, and also more robust bots, and things of this kind. Do you? We both have VR headsets that we use pretty routinely.
Rift.
I have the Mirror Windows mixed reality headset, but I do get to use it a lot. It's kind of nice that it has the some desktop and other integration with the Windows system. That's kind of some of its functionality, but I digress. So at the nexus of these two things, you might have people, let's say very older people, or people deriving some real companionship from an augmented reality personality who is in fact just ones and zeros. Do you find that story to be a hopeful story, or kind of a uncanny valley, depressing weird?
Well, I'm kind of two minds about it, because number one, I suppose someone could build their best friend out of a virtual presence, and that would be kind of sad, because people should get out and interact with each other more. On the other hand, I think it'd be really cool to play with such a thing and see what you could do if you could manipulate this virtual entity to be this way or that way, or have them mold themselves to what you need or whatever. It would just be such an interesting experiment, even if I do think that it probably shouldn't replace other people, meet people. But then again, I could get into the whole thing about how we might be able to make ourselves into similarly virtual presences and stuff like that. I don't know. There's so many different directions I could take it.
I'd really like to have that.
Yeah.
I'd really like to have virtual Ben kind of doing some work while I'm just taking a nap.
Yeah. Well, and I've often thought about what it would take. A lot of people go, well, I want to upload myself into the computer or whatever. I'm like, you can't do that. You're not software. You are your wetware is what you are. But I've thought, how could you possibly do that?
Some approximation of that.
Yeah. Because, the only way I've really thought about how to do it is if you could take these little nanobots and have them replace your brain synapse by synapse while maintaining that continuity of consciousness, but they're just slowly replacing the meat with mechanics. I think that you would still remain you. I think you'd still retain your consciousness. It might have some weird functional differences just because, all the chemicals aren't an issue anymore. But at the same time, I think once you were able to make the thing that processes you into something electronic, then the possibilities open up a lot more than when you are the product of meat. If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Oh no, it's an incredible. You have an incredible diversity of forms and skills beyond what we would have today in that form. And I do think that is a prospect for the future. It might be some ways off, but it is. I've talked to a lot of people who find that preferable to digital resurrection. It's
Yeah.
nothing. It's a pretty poor price to actually have been dead and be brought back as a robot dog. But the prospect of fixing things and replacing, and that's maybe a continuation of what we already have in some form in medicine, but just at this neuronal level. So let's say this: there's a product, Neuralace. Elon Musk has this thing that it is wetware. It's non-invasive, but it's a brain-computer interface that's a little more sophisticated than some of the other things that rely on EEG and such. But this is something that's now in the next maybe 18 months or so coming to human trials. There's already a monkey that has it, and it's coming to human trials for people that have specific conditions, neurodegenerative conditions or quadriplegia type conditions. But let's say in 24 months or 48 months, it's now available to you and I. Is that something that could be something that could leapfrog this move towards digitalization of the mind? Is that something that you would want to try, or you want to hold off on that, see how it looks?
You say it's non-invasive. Of course, I want to try it.
Yeah,
I mean, that's one of my big concerns about things like this is how permanent is it? Can you reverse it? And if this thing you're talking about is non-invasive, you don't need some surgical procedure to
it is a
implant
surgical procedure.
It is.
It's just small. Yeah, it is medically invasive to a certain degree, but it's these tiny micro threads. It would not be terribly noticeable. There might be some interface issues where early adapters might, but according to the schematics that I've seen, an upgrade to the software and so forth would work with the same port if you using next generations of it. And so it's a little scary, and it's why but Elon Musk has described this as something that is almost a kind of part of an AI arms race. Like Elon Musk has said that he thinks AI is summoning the demon. He thinks that we could have AI that is runaway AI that we're not in control of. So he thinks that people using stuff like this will then have the tools at their disposal to really be able to guide AI in a better direction. So that's why he thinks that you and I should use this. But for the main core of that business, what it is for otherly abled people. But yeah, there's other companies that are doing ones that are less invasive, but they don't quite have that. This one has basically cloning 20,000 neurons as opposed to a few hundred. So that is enough to have an experience well beyond just moving a cursor and things like that.
Well, I mean, I never really thought of the AI arms race thing, but I have to say, by this point, everyone should have at least seen the Terminator in 2001 and know that AI needs some sort of cutoff kill switch, in case, some sort of code that says, okay, Hal, you've gone too far, click. That it seems like everyone should know that's a thing, right? And why is your
Neil deGrasse Tyson says about runaway AI? He says, I'm not too scared of runaway AI because I know where the power plug is. I can just pull the plug, right? That seems like a fake concern.
Yeah. I mean, but with that in mind, I mean, I'm trying to think, like, if I had some sort of interface like that, I would love to be able to use something like that with my 3D animation stuff,
Mm.
because there are certain things like rigging a character to move that are such a bitch. I mean, seriously, just the interface alone, saying, okay, I need to access that particular vertex on that particular model, but I need to be able to select it in such a way that I don't unselect those without selecting everything else. It's just a giant pain in the ass. And being able to do it like in your head, just saying, okay, computer, rotate it that way, select this, rotate it that would be so badass, you know. I have played around with some virtual like 3D modeling stuff where you're actually in VR, and it's pretty crude right now. But if I were to be able to have one of my 3D models like just right there in front of me and say, okay, this go here, instead of like click drag, and you don't have it in 3 dimensions, so you're not necessarily certain whether you put it in the right place, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, 3D animation is fun, but it's a pain in the ass. And having it in a VR or AR setting would be wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And if this implant can do it, that'd be great.
Well, you don't necessarily have to get an implant to do that. Within the last 2 years, more and more machine learning usages for kind of taking some of the man hours out of those processes have come through. I wish I could pull up the full article um, and describe the full particulars, but there's just removing a lot of steps from that equation by these predictive algorithms being able to do some of that work. See, I taught Unity 3D small children for a while, and oh my god, it was like herding cats, and also but also just they would be working an awful lot. We would all be working an awful lot just to get short sequence made or something, and that's kind of the way it is with this sort of thing as you described.
Yeah.
Um,
I saw something recently, not quite as advanced as this, but apparently they're making these like temporary tattoos you can put on that let you control stuff. And they look like circuitry, and you can use it to like turn on and off stuff in your home. And I'm sitting there thinking, temporary tattoos? Oh, that's cute. You know? But
yeah,
hey,
yeah, there are increasingly more options for biohacking in body art. How do you feel about biohacking? Is it a good use of people's energies? Do you think it moves us towards some techno futurist outcome?
I've never actually heard that term before. It's probably one of those things where I know exactly what it is. I've just never heard it called that.
Oh, did I say body hacking? I meant biohacking.
You
Oh
did
yeah,
say
so
biohacking, but
so
still.
biohacking, the most commonplace uses for biohacking today might be uh, having an RFID chip put in your finger so you don't ever have to worry about losing your keys. Just boom, open
Ah,
the door. Boom, turn on the car. Um, and it's some workplaces have adapted this. If people in the workplace all sign up for it in advance, then the workplace will provide this because it saves everybody time and money.
well, I can see a couple of ways that that could go wrong, but it does sound pretty convenient. I mean, I know when I go to like my pharmacist, for example, they usually have their name and password as barcodes, just like, with some adhesive tape or something on their hands, so they don't have to type it in all the time. They can just scan it. And what you're talking about sounds very similar, but because it's like implanted under a finger or something, it just seems like there's going to be a market on rich people's fingers from now on. Like that's how you're going to steal someone's car, is cut off their
Yeah.
finger. I mean, I got a barcode tattoo a while back, and it's on my inner forearm because that's where it was in the Terminator, right? But ever since then, I've been seeing it on the back of the neck, and I guess I understand why. Because if you cut off someone's head, that kills them. You cut off their arm, they're still alive, and so arms are just easier to take than necks when it comes to barcodes and such like that. So I'm not entirely certain I'd be down with like an implant like that unless it was much harder to remove than, just dismemberment.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You put it
That's
right
definitely.
here, right on the tip of your nose, and you just walk around and it scans it as you walk. Maybe, but.
Yeah. Well, there's pretty sophisticated biometrics for the eyes that are able to offer an array of things like this, and that's pretty. That's not invasive. Just having your eye scanned. But yeah, that's a trope in science fiction, sci-fi, horror, and science
Yeah.
fiction films too.
Mm.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah,
I,
sorry, sorry
I
to
remember
see
that
that.
from Demolition Man, or Wesley Snipes as the dude's eyeball, and yeah.
That's a crazy movie.
Oh, I love Demolition Man. That's so much
Yeah,
fun. I'm
that is a
curious
fun
what it would have been like because originally in Sandra Bullock's role they cast Lori Petty, and I'm curious what that would have been like. I like
probably.
Lori Petty. I've liked her ever since I guess Point Break and Tank Girl.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. She was good in Orange Is the New Black. She was in the
mm. Oh well, that's weird though. She's been playing mentally damaged people for a while now. Like her role in House was that as well.
yeah.
I don't know. I hope she's okay in real life. I have no way of knowing, but she's been playing so many like damaged people lately. Maybe she's just being typecast. I don't know.
Yeah. But yeah, the most aside from kind of modern primitivist stuff, the most kind of um, the a lot of the applications of biohacking would be CRISPR stuff. I mean, it's conceivable that you can be doing your own personalized medicine at some point, and some people are already kind of stepping into this, and I think that brings a lot to the table in ways that some of the emerging culture stuff might to some degree. But the so with the CRISPR stuff, you could say you can effectively flip a switch, and now you have more melanin, or now you have different color hair. Now you have different kinds of features of this kind. And some people, some researchers in biomedicine, they don't like that people are going to be doing this stuff. They think that it's stealing their thunder, or turning into a sideshow or something. I mean, I don't know.
Well, I mean, I can definitely think of some uses for that sort of thing, like personal uses. Because I got to admit that there are a number of genetic lotteries I lost. My eyes were crap until I got LASIK. I did have the brain surgery I had to do to get rid of the seizures. And my hair, you should see what it looks like after a shower. Oh my gosh, it's a horror show. Like if a puffer fish was electrocuted is what I look like when my hair does what it wants to, right? And having the ability to tell my body, no, 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 like this, not like that, to not be in quite so much of a fixer upper would be nice, So if you have access to that sort of thing, more of this, more of that, give me this, like endorphins or whatever, that'd be pretty awesome.
Mhm. I interviewed earlier this week. I interviewed Liz Parrish of BioViva. She's sort of patient zero in this kind of personalized medicine and genomics field. She participated as a subject in some of these in this telomere lengthening experiment. It's really fascinating, and she's kind of a hero to a lot of people in our communities. But we were talking about
Oh,
this
wait,
same
wait, wait. Hold
subject.
on, hold on, hold on. Rewind that for a second.
Sure.
Telomere lengthening. So, like what? Keeping her from aging?
Yes, yes. She's
Whoa.
she made herself a test subject in this telomere lengthening to end aging in her body, or to slow aging in her body. It
Well,
was
how'd that
controversial.
go?
She left the United States to do this. She went to Colombia. Colombia. Yeah, it all comes back. Yeah.
No,
She
but
went.
how'd that go? I mean, how did it work out? I
Well,
mean, not how did it function, but how did it? What was the effect?
There were some moderate to good successes with. It's a small sample size, and so this work has been criticized on that. But I mean, to my mind, the work that her company is doing generally, including putting herself out there, is makes an incredible contribution to this field. I think that we all need to. I believe we all should be trying to enhance these life extension technologies. And one way to do that is just to be talking about them with people, and embracing these organizations and individuals who are willing to be at the vanguard of this.
Well, I have to admit, that sounds intriguing as hell. I'd kind of like to do it. Although I'm now picturing some sort of like dystopian thing where only some people can afford it. So some people live longer than other people, and everyone. It's very sort of Battle Angel Alita kind
Yeah,
of in a way. It's that hey, there's the floating city of the people who live forever, and we're all the proles down here kind of thing.
or
Uh,
Demolition Man.
yeah, well, something like that. But I mean, the point is that I mean, if 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 they do it, they should find a way to make it affordable for everybody. Darn it! Because one of my biggest fears, I've mentioned this before on my channel, about dying is not being dead. I can handle that. And if I go in a way that is not horribly painful, that'd be nice too. But what really scares me is the things I'm going to miss out on.
Mm.
You know, it's like what if on the very day that I die, they invent the flying car finally? You know,
Mm.
they invent hyperspace travel finally, and I get to miss out on it because darn it, I was born too early. I mean, I wouldn't give being an '80s kid for any give up being an '80s kid for anything, but at the same time, what I wouldn't give to live at a time when interstellar travel was commonplace. And it seems like the only way I could ever accomplish that, short of becoming some sort of self-aware AI, would be to do this thing you're talking about, like with telomere lengthening. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, an irony of this, and I had a number of talks with people, including an emissary from the Estonian government, who's he has they have broad e-governance, which is now allowing them to have blockchain medicine in their public health service. But the irony of, and I've talked to a number of other people about this too, David Wood, UK Transhumanist Party founder, and a few others. The irony of this is that life extension technologies and the monitoring, it's in the new iWatch now, just constant monitoring of certain biometrics. This prevention is cheaper as it unfolds, as it becomes a big part of the healthcare marketplace. It's cheaper to just keep your body in good shape than it is to try and fix something that's gone horribly wrong at the end of life, or this or that. So we could see trillions of dollars in cost savings from this kind of monitoring and from what is effectively life extension. It's cheaper to be effectively an immortal than it is to be a normal person who gets sick and their body degenerates. So
Sounds like a win all across the board, doesn't it?
yeah. Hopefully but it is increasingly becoming something that is we're shifting focus to. Another person who's in this presidential primary, she just entered, Kimberly Forsyth. We've been friends and collaborators for a little while, and we're working on a project together with the Estonian government. She's getting to a second round of with the Estonian government on a similar initiative, and one part of that is basically that a change of focus to the idea that dying and aging rather is a disease, and it allows institutions to kind of shift focus to these prevention measures. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, Benjamin Franklin. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I hadn't heard about this experiment, so it sounds really cool.
It might not be so far off. We think of this as something that's 50 years away or something, but for certainly even Liz Parrish talked about this, what they're doing to reverse the effects of Alzheimer's and neurodegenerative conditions in general is coming at us hot and fast. These kinds of changes, just like the Neuralase stuff, it's coming faster than we realize. We run the risk of not being able to use it because people aren't ready, not because the technology isn't ready, but because people haven't really considered it or aren't ready to adopt it. And that's kind of sad to me, because that could represent But
I mean, yeah, it does seem like it would be such an enormous shift, just socially, so like in society, to think, well, okay, grandma's not going to die this time around, that kind of thing. But I mean, also with the way that we're consuming on this planet, it would almost require us to start colonizing somewhere just because there'll be that much population overflow. Or well, either that or it's going to be even more dystopian with restrictions on births now, that kind of thing. So it might be that people aren't ready for it, which kind of stinks. But what can you do? I mean, it does seem like we're outrunning our maturity with our technology.
yeah, there's many ways in which that is apt to happen that we can't quite predict. I think that the Malthusian dilemma is Columbia.
Sorry, she was really bitching. She wanted to be part of this. So I don't know if you could hear her over the microphone, but she was meowing. And I was like, okay, get up here, you.
Oh, nice. Yeah, there's ways that we won't be able to predict that's going to be the case. That we'll have
no, not against the microphone.
Something that we're not ready for, particularly as it relates to, I mean, the CRISPR stuff. There's risks. Advanced algorithm stuff. There's just a lot more uncertainties as to what could kind of be disruptive in ways that but yeah, it's interesting stuff. The I mean, to my mind, I think that's why I'm a transhumanist, is because I want this life extension in the way that you described. That's not a digital divide. That's not a boutique service for high net worth individuals, but that's for everybody. And I think that those high net worth individuals are concerned about that too, because for one thing, the more people that are in that system, there's a network effect. The faster it comes, the more, but also just because they don't want to be in Demolition Man, where Wesley Snipes is traveling through time to attack them.
Well, I mean, in Demolition Man was a bit different. He was cryogenically frozen, but still.
Yeah, and yeah, the traveling through time bit even so, but not a realistic concern, but
yeah. But actually, I have come to real, and it's weird. You ever come up with an idea, and the next thing you know, you're seeing it everywhere after you said it in public? Because I was thinking about how time travel would probably kill you, simply because most people assume that their time machine is going to stay rooted to where it is on the Earth rather than maintain where it is in space. So if you travel like even a day, Earth's way the heck over there and you're in vacuum now and probably suffocating because you didn't think of that. But I wonder, like what if time travel was a method of like interstellar travel, where it's like, okay, Earth is going to be here at this time. So if I activate the time travel at that exact time, when this other planet is going to be really close, like 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 years before or after, it doesn't really matter, does it? That'll be one way to travel to that planet really quickly, is through time travel. Of course, getting back to Earth would probably not be something you could do, simply because Earth will still be moving during the time you spend on that planet that's also moving, and etc. But even so, it seems like a way to achieve interstellar travel just by standing still in space but moving in time. I don't know. Maybe I've overthought that, but still.
that would be a cool thing. Isaac Arthur, who was kind enough to also be on my podcast, he would love that. He would love. I bet he would love to talk to you about that. It brings to mind something. I've interviewed a few people who are cryonics experts of one kind or another. So let's suppose that the vitrification is perfected and the reanimation is perfected, and now you have an option where maybe for this reason or that medical reason, you're coming back and it's 1,000 years in the future. Is that you wake up and everybody's so different. Everybody's doing things in a different way. They probably all have brain-computer interfaces and layers and layers of digital assistants. And do you think you're excited to explore this world, or do you think that it's too much of a culture shock for you?
Well, I've been thinking about culture shock a lot. I mean, again, with the whole time travel thing, I'd love to go back to, say, the 50s with today's music and today's TV and movies and just see what happens to people's brains when they experience it. But going in the other direction, I don't know. I mean, it sounds like an absolute blast. But at the same time, I don't know what's going to happen in 1,000 years. For all I know, it's going to be freaking Mad Max or whatever out there, or it could be Star Trek: The Next Generation. Who knows, right? But assuming it's, well, let's split the difference and say it's Blade Runner out there. And I mean, it still sounds like something that would be a lot of fun, but I don't know if I could assimilate. I don't know. I mean, that's the problem, is there is a lot of unknown there. Because if I look at someone from the 50s who would look at like entertainment from today, even assuming they understood stuff like cell phones and all of that, they'd probably go, what happened to you people? You are so socially different. You speak differently. You are willing to tolerate certain things in public differently. What could happen in 1,000 years? What could change in 1,000 years that would make me go, I can't believe this is permitted now, or I can't believe this is possible now? I don't know. Um, I think if I was given the choice, I'd take it, but I'd be very worried about it too.
It's a good analogy because I mean, if people in our communities, many of them are techno singularitarians, so they see this Moore's law escape velocity, and it's Ray Kurzweil, one of the architects of this set of ideas, has said, and others have said, we in that framework we can expect 1,000 years of change in 1 year, along. So we may all have that in the cards for us, even if we don't have our heads frozen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's
That's
another thing.
that's a scary thing.
You mentioned the reanimation process from cryogenics. I mean, I'm not a biologist. I just read a lot of sci-fi, but I seem to vaguely remember one of the problems with reviving someone from a deep freeze like that was that like defrosting your cells caused them to like burst or something.
Yeah,
And I'm like, yeah, I'd rather wait for suspended animation rather than cryogenics. Just saying,
I would
you
tend
know.
to agree. Even in the 30 odd years since cryonics has been a service, um, some improvements have been made in that set of concerns, with better vitrification, not exploding the cells, not basically just putting something in the freezer and having it crystallize incorrectly. But it's not perfect. And also the reanimation, but all the people that I know who are cryo clients, they're aware of these flaws, but it's for them, it's still a worthwhile service, even as a measure of last resort, because they do want to see that future. And maybe the technical hurdles that are overcome, maybe it happens sooner than we think.
But think of the irony of, like, if these people decided, yeah, like when I die or I'm really close to dying, freeze my brain and then revive me when it's possible to give me a new body, and then it turns out that, yeah, we can revive the people who use the second and third generation freezing technique, but your brain was first, and they used a different formula that is unrevivifiable. Can't do it. I mean, that would suck so hard. You'd never know it. I mean, you'd still be pretty dead, but at the same time, man, imagine how horrible that would be if you just waited for the next upgrade. You could actually have been revived. I mean, that's another one of the things I've thought about, when I've thought very seriously about how would I, if I had the ability to do it, how would I preserve myself for the future? And cryogenics has so many problems with it. So,
Yeah, it's a little bit like what you said before about being the last person to die of natural aging before that longevity escape velocity is reached.
yeah.
What a sad story that would be.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be somebody. Hopefully it's not me.
Well, one thing, another story, similar story I've been hearing about is, how they're making self-driving cars, right? And people are talking about how like Lyft and Uber might be replaced by self-driven cars instead of people actually at the wheel. And so someone was pointing out, well, then at some point, inevitably, someone is going to die on their ride. Like this car is going to show up for the next rider with a corpse in the back seat. And who's that going to be? Who's the first dead body in a self-driven taxi?
Yeah. That's quite the quite the horror movie image. But at the same time, 35,000 or so, slightly less now, people die every year from human error in automobiles. So the trolley problem of this AI having to make those decisions of do I swerve and hit the old lady on the bicycle and kill one person, or do I crash in the ditch and kill all of us? Those problems will be a lot less. That number will be from the tens of thousands down to the hundreds, by a small number of more automated vehicles on the road could reduce those numbers considerably, and would operate kind of like a disease vector in that regard. So people who focus only on the trolley problem and not on the fact that it fixes a whole host of other more serious problems, I always wonder kind of what's your game.
Yeah, well, I mean, it does. I've noticed a trend of some people who can't see past like levels 1 or 2 in a problem or something, where they can't plan for the far future. It's only immediately the right here and now. And I try to make sure that I don't do that. I'm sure there's times I fall prey to that myself, but I try to think more long term than that. And it's very frustrating when you see other people who won't do it, to everybody's detriment, not just their own.
Yeah.
So,
I, I regard that as one of the biggest organizational failings of our civil society and public policy. Is in a no, it's not only a lack of foresight. It's an unwillingness to have delay of gratification as well. It's just an immaturity.
yeah, there is that too.
Yeah.
I don't know. Heck, even just simple things like that. Like for a while, I've had enough in pocket to pay off a loan, but I've thought about it, and I'm like, if I just keep making payments, sure, it'll be more expensive in the long run, but it'll also make my credit score kick ass. And I think a lot of people do that with technology as well, medicine and all kinds of other things, where they don't really stop and consider the long-term consequences.
Yeah. And for metaverse stuff, it's maybe missing out on something cool by a year or something. But with the public health stuff, that could equate to millions of people dying by us just not kind of pulling our heads out of our butts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but the thing is, the number of times I've seen some really cool technology teased in an article somewhere, and then it never manifests in any kind of accessible way to like, I mean, I remember, what was it, like 2, 3, 4 years ago now, that I heard about Microsoft HoloLens. I have not seen one in person yet. I've not seen any get my hands on it. And I bet and everything I've heard about it makes it sound like it's in no way a gaming platform at all. Right. And I'm just sitting here thinking that like having some accessible AR would be amazing. We still don't even have like omnidirectional treadmills for Oculus Rift or anything. And
Awesome. Wow.
I'm like, come on, move it. You've been teasing us with this stuff for ages. Come on.
You can build a cheap hack of an omnidirectional treadmill out of plywood, where you just have carpet rollers on your shoes, and you build something that's a semi-sphere out of wood, and you can put some bungee cords around yourself. You can build this cheap hack, so you can be walking in a naturalistic way and gaming at the same time for $50.
Well, but the game won't know you're walking, though.
Yeah, they have. Yeah, there's definitely interface concerns.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things is like travel in first person VR games is still like teleportation. You know,
Yeah.
I'm pointing at where I want to go, and then I let go and it sends me there. And it's like we should be able to walk by now in VR. We should. There's no reason we can't. They have treadmills now, but you have to like spend thousands upon thousands of dollars for them to put them in an arcade where people rent them for an hour. You know, they don't have them for home use yet.
Yeah.
They keep teasing it, but they never do it.
Yeah. There's a couple lower cost options, but they're not as good as the ones that cost $15,000 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, you know, it reminds me, talking about HoloLens and that kind of AR, of a conversation we had before. So one of the things that I got to play with when I did play with the HoloLens, I don't have one, was this virtual conductor, virtual orchestra thing that my friend was developing. So I got to you know, like have all these instruments around me, and they start playing different tracks, and you're kind of, it's sort of like a DJ app or something, but with all of this augmented reality stuff going on in your face. It was pretty cool. And I remember we talked about advanced algorithms one time in the context of computer generated music and interactions therein. And I wondered if you had any other musings on that since then.
Not really. I mean, I don't know how anyone can compose artificial music and make it sound good. I've only found one site that does it, and they've been down for a while, teasing some sort of like massive improvement, but it's been down for months, and I'm really disappointed. But they made some of the most realistic sounding artificial music I've ever heard. Like they never really produced a tune with a hook, like a rock song or anything, but some of the stuff, like they made this orchestral movie style music that was, I mean, it wasn't necessarily indistinguishable from being digital. Like you didn't necessarily say, oh yeah, that's real instruments, but you could sit down and listen to it and not automatically think, oh yeah, this is computer generated. It didn't sound like something that came out of a MIDI keyboard or anything, you know? And it's an amazing site. I really wish they'd come back, especially since I intend to use some of their stuff in one of my animations that I'm working on. But other than that, I mean, unless you want what you're making to sound like something out of 8 or 16-bit Nintendo, I haven't found any good AI music.
Yeah. I've kind of seen the same thing where some of that stuff is advanced to pretty in pretty real ways, but it's and also some of it's kind of like it is kind of like the what we were just saying about the omnidirectional treadmill. It's just not a service. It's not a freemium service on web-based apps today. It's something that you're going to pay a lot of money for if you want the high-end version. Certainly, even just getting some instruments that sound like real instruments, you know, aside from the composition.
Well, I mean, that was one of the things I loved about JukeDeck, the site I was talking about, is if you gave them attribution, you could use whatever you made on their site for free, or you could give them like $4 or $5 or something. It was some really low price for the track without giving them attribution. You know, so I mean, it was totally free, and it was an amazing tool to use for making music, and they had a lot of different styles too. So. Heck, I'm gonna check and see if they're up again yet.
I just searched them too. So I wanted to look at that later.
Yeah. And no, it just says we can't tell you more just yet, but we're looking forward to continuing to fuel creativity using musical AI. And it's been saying that for months. I hope they actually do come back because it was an amazing site. Oh well.
You know, 25 years ago or whenever, when I was doing rudimentary audio-visual kind of stuff, if somebody had told me that in 2017 or whenever it happened, that we would have the ability to deep fake voices, audio fakes, and deep fake faces before we have some of these other abilities, like just to fix, like to turn crappy video into HD video, I thought that would come like 10 years before. But I'm kind of astonished. You know, there was a heist with an audio fake where somebody cloned an email account and then they sent an audio command from this executive, like, now transfer all of this money to this account and via this channel. And, and they were like, well, it's the guy's voice. But it was an audio fake cloned from like spying on his phone calls and stuff. It's like crazy stuff like that happening because of the because this stuff is coming to the desktop now.
Well,
What do you think about that?
Well, okay. The first place my brain went with that is text to speech voices, because I've noticed if you look around for different voices speaking English, you can get all kinds of accents. You can get Scottish, Irish, various different regions all through Britain, you know, like London and Northern and Southern, all that stuff. You can get Australian, New Zealander, all of that. You can even get like a Swedish accent, American or English voice, but you can only, for an American accent, get the most generic American ever. You cannot get Southern. You cannot get like a Valley girl, like, oh my God, you got to turn left here. You know, you can't get that. You can't get like say a New York Italian, you know, hey, you're supposed to turn left over here. Huh? What are you doing? You know, you can't get that. It doesn't exist. You just have the most generic American accent voice. And I actually contacted one of these text-to-speech places and asked them, why is that? And they said, because Americans don't buy it. Even people with like the most deep Southern accent you ever heard wants the generic Star Trek computer voice. And I thought that was really odd, because I actually want a text-to-speech like voice that sounds like that sort of Italian from Brooklyn guy. You know, hey, I'm walking here, that guy. I want that as my text-to-speech. But I was looking around and found a couple of sites that will take your voice and turn it into a text-to-speech voice. You have to pay for the final result. You can hear it, but you can't download it.
I've tried that, one of those too.
Yeah, I mean, they for anyone watching, they give you a bunch of phrases to read, and the more you read, the more it learns what you sound like, right? And so I did it, and after like 40, 50 pages, it still didn't sound exactly like me, but maybe it would be close enough to fool anything that's voice activated. I don't know.
Yeah, that was my
So
experience too. It did sound a lot like me, but there were just those little blips and irregularities and kind of uncanny valley effects that were pretty easy to sniff out.
it was a little muffled at times, where it
Yeah,
sounded
that's right.
like my
But
voice was a little mumbly, a little like I don't know if I had a phrase, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It would go like, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, you know, like that. And it was like, yeah, I wouldn't quite have that sort of speech impediment sound going on, but I don't know.
that's a feature of mass media, having a bigger role in people's lives. Those regional accents and literal patois, literal like separate languages, uh, they're all falling away. Everybody's basically talking in this generalized northeastern accent, no matter whether they're from some island off of the Carolinas or the mountains in Appalachia, or like all of those people that had some of them had separate languages and certainly separate accents. Like they're now all just talking like people on CNN.
Okay.
I mean, to some degree, that's
I
part of
always wish.
that's part of the effect that you would see why people aren't buying those things, is because they don't really place a lot of stock in it anymore. That we don't as a society. And it's kind of another double-edged sword of I guess emerging technology is losing some of that cultural flavor, or that diversity. I don't know.
Well, by the same token, I do wish I had an accent that Americans consider cool. You know, Australian maybe, or one various form or another of British. Just because, well, one thing I've noticed is if you have a YouTube channel and you cover the same content as certain people in a community, but you have a cool accent, up go your views, up go your subscribers. It's just like it's enough of a trend that I've noticed it. And yeah, there have been times I've seriously considered like trying to pretend I have an accent just to see what happens. And if I hadn't been as well established as a YouTuber as I am now, I might have faked it. I don't know. But I have actually been considering, like, if Trump wins a second term, I might genuinely want to leave the country. And I've been looking at where to go. And I thought England at first, but then I remembered, oh, yeah, clouds will kill me. So I'm actually looking at maybe New Zealand. And I think having a New Zealand accent on YouTube would be cool. And I noticed, I mean, I was raised in Vermont, and I've lost most of my New England accent after 20 years in Seattle and now 3 in Southern California. But some of it is still there, little bit. But I lost it pretty quickly, which makes me think if I did move to New Zealand, I, it wouldn't take too long to lose the American accent. Like not on, and I don't mean on purpose. I mean it would happen naturally, just because I'd be surrounded by other people speaking differently.
I mean, just from hearing you a few minutes ago, you obviously have a gift for that kind of mimicry. So you'd probably be a couple of days.
Um, well, but I mean, like I say, it would eventually happen naturally. Like I wouldn't be doing a character voice or anything. It would just I would slowly assimilate over like the course of a year or two, probably. I think. I don't know.
You know, it's interesting when we talk about these the this uh, this ability to change these things. Your mind is pretty plastic in these regards. You know, when we get into this idea of Neuralace, um, uh, one thing that comes up in any of these contexts is what is the definition of literacy in this world with natural language processing, in this world with brain computer interfaces. Why should someone learn to read if they have access to another um, avenue of communication that's 40 times faster? Uh,
Emergencies.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, learn to read just as a contingency.
yeah.
I mean, if something goes wrong with the mainframe computer, it's down. You don't know how to repair it. You can't Google how to repair it anymore because it's broken. You need the manual, right? That's why you should learn to read. It's just because it could come in handy at some point. Now, I suppose reading could end up obsolete if language became obsolete. I mean, if we're all reading like computer code now, and it's not a matter of these symbols represent sounds anymore, then I suppose I can see how reading might go away. But at the same time, it seems like we would want to keep it as long as we're still speaking vocally. Merciful Zeus, my kitty's bitching.
Oh,
It's, let's see, like a half hour from dinner time, so I should ignore her
okay,
pitiful
Columbia.
mewlings.
Well, one last question along those lines. Is there any line for you of things that you wouldn't want to cross? You know, we talked about the virtual Kate, who is a lot like the real Kate and has autonomy, and you know, is obviously not you, but it's close enough to being like you that people would be fooled with it by it. You could. Is there any line in losing the sense of self or the sense of the way that you are in the world of communication that you wouldn't want to cross?
Uh, Probably, but nothing that immediately leaps to mind, I suppose. If it were like we can all turn ourselves into code in some fashion. I mean, I've often thought about like if you sort of jack in cyberpunk style, and then you end up like your defenses go down. The next thing you know, you're getting pop-ups in your vision all day long, and you can't do anything about it even when you're jacked out because it's been put into your brain, kind of thing. I mean, like computer viruses that literally affect your head meats. That worries me. That is definitely something that worries me. Also, the idea of like if you do get that cyberware and you can jack in, how do you upgrade? Do you have to get another surgical procedure? I mean, it just seems like there are so many possible problems with that. What if there's some way that someone can take your virtual consciousness and absorb it, and the next thing you know, you're part of them? I don't know. I mean, it's possible I read way too much sci-fi, but these are the kinds of things that have occasionally made me, while I'm like reading a book or watching a movie or something where this sort of thing goes on, I'm like, I, this gives me pause. This makes me wait and think, hey,
It's,
maybe I don't want to do this exactly.
I think it should give anyone pause. I mean, what personality is a feature of memory and agency, and if you have this proliferation of tongues in those areas, you have a potential for a society that's becoming quite mad.
Mm.
It is concerning, and and also just incredibly interesting. It'd be for me, it would be a flame as a moth that I would be drawn to, whether I was able to see that there was real risks or not. But
One thing I would love to do along those lines, though, is if we can give those interfaces to, say, non humans and be able to communicate with them for real for the first time, you know, beyond the basic you're meowing, shut up, I'll feed you in a minute kind of stuff. I mean, to actually like jack your cat into the matrix and then be able to do that with yourself and be able to communicate with your cat on a more like personal level like that. How cool would that be?
well, this Neuralace monkey is effectively an uplifted monkey. I mean, because one of the main reasons that humans are not able to communicate with other creatures is that they don't have the gift of speech, they don't have the hyoid bone, and so forth. But if you're able to circumvent that, and also the Neuralace thing, it's a little bit of an open question, but it was pretty clear in the presentation that this is kind of a Johnny mnemonic type thing that you were talking about, where you can like upload a skill. You don't have to learn the skill. It's just now you kind of there's some complexities there, but now you have French. You didn't have French before. Now you have French.
Yeah. Well,
So
and
kind of
that's actually something I've wondered about a couple of times is if you were to like would you only have the ability to speak French as long as you were connected? If you unconnected it, would it stay or go away?
Yeah,
You
I
know?
think that for most of these things, you don't want to unconnect it too much. But I think probably it becomes something, depending what you're doing, it becomes like a sense memory where you would still retain it.
Hmm.
Um, uh, uh, and also just like if I use Google to real time translate Russian right now a million times, like I have actually also learned Russian in the course of that
Hmm.
to some degree. So I imagine it would be something like that. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I don't think that even because there's not been human trials, I don't think that even Elon Musk knows. He might be able to answer some of those things quite a bit better than I would. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I know that if given the opportunity to be part of this sort of thing, even if only as an observer or just someone throwing ideas out there, heck, I'll design the box art for the product. I don't care. I would just love if someone asked me, I'd be like, yes, I want in
yeah,
one way
I
or
would want to
another.
be an early adapter of this too. I mean, for one thing, in the techno optimist community, it's been a bridge too far to have planned communities, seasteading, and that sort of thing. But with this kind of uh, incredible influx of man hours and work product with something like this, and enhanced connectivity in something like Neuralace, it would be a lot easier for a small number of people to really organize some really high end projects, on the order of leaving Earth or something like that. So I'd really like to be one of those people who would be one of those first or early adapters.
Well, I know that video games are not necessarily the best way to gauge how easy or difficult something might be, but I've been playing this game, Surviving Mars, if you've ever heard of it. It's like Sim City, but you're building a Martian colony. And I'm looking at it thinking, I'm not sure I'd want to be one of the first colonists on Mars. Maybe I'd go up in shipload number 8, but not number 1, because it looks like it would be really difficult to live there prior to there being like a big old city. I mean, the way the game works is you actually send drones to construct your first dome, and then you send colonists, right? Like they're not being sent there and then they have to construct it themselves. It doesn't work like that. But even so, like just living in this tiny ass dome in the middle of a planet that is definitely not exactly friendly to human life. I'd want more of an infrastructure before I went.
Mhm. It's a good point. Yeah, there's definitely things where you could really be messing yourself up. Certainly in the in the biohacking, and I think to some degree in the advanced algorithm stuff on a personal level. But it is interesting that you kind of bring to mind this God game, because I just imagining in this post Neuralink world where it seems like you're playing a God game, but you're actually constructing a new reality for yourself,
Yeah.
in one way or another.
Well, I mean, that's another thing. What about people who like they construct their perfect world in a virtual space and then just never leave it?
Right, right.
I mean,
They've become
eventually you'd have to like feed yourself somehow. You'd have to realize, oh, hey, out in meat space, I actually have to have some food intake. I can't just sit here in cyberspace the whole time.
mm,
I don't know. I mean, it seems like a lot of people would just leave the real world behind as much as they possibly could because the virtual world is that much better.
I wonder about that too. I think that a lot of people will, because there's going to be so many options for augmented reality improving interactions in meat space, that a lot of people that will tend to be more interesting to people in the near term. But in the longer term, that is a very real concern. I think it's one answer to the Fermi paradox. Like, why don't we find other spacefaring aliens? Is because they've maybe become these I mean, that's not my theory, I should say. That's actual smart guy said that first. But they become these kind of virtual hermits. Um, it's interesting, but I think that it's I don't know the extent to which people will become completely isolated in these solipsistic fantasies or these things, but it, it it seems like a realistic possibility. It gets into a lot of simulation theory stuff um, about the metaverse as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of VR games where I do pretty well. There's this one called Spark. It's basically a sport. It's like a cross between dodgeball and racquetball and Tron,
Hmm.
and it's a lot of fun. I can be pretty badass in it.
Hmm.
And then I go out and I walk to the store and I'm like, no one knows that I'm this like video game badass while I'm walking around. It's kind of like in Ready Player One when you discover who people are outside of that world. You're like, wait, you're just a kid? How can you possibly be just a kid? That kind of thing. You
Hmm.
know.
Do you
So
think
I know the feeling.
do you think that you or people generally who are using VR in this way do you think that you're in better physical condition? Do you think that some of these games are good for physical conditioning and training?
Some of them are for
Yeah.
sure, and I figure if we finally get those omnidirectional treadmills, it'll be even better. I mean, because they right now have virtual Skyrim and virtual Fallout 4. And if you were actually able to run, duck behind some cover, and then run, and all that stuff, I mean, I can't even imagine the shape I'd be in. It'd be amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. That-
So, but I mean, with Spark, a lot of what you're doing is throwing a ball, dodging, throwing a ball, dodging, that kind of thing. And I mean, you will get a workout, you will sweat. I mean, it's not as good as rollerblading, but it's exercise for sure.
yeah. And I mean the fact that if you really to have optimal health, you need an hour or so of that a day. And if that is your gaming regimen, also, you're really kind of killing two birds with one stone. It
Hmm.
is kind of I can't imagine the world of just a kind of a really heavy set guy drinking Mountain Dew and sitting in the chair is kind of going to continue. That trend will be reversed.
Oh,
And
if
it's
we have proper VR where, like you've got the body suit and it can react and all of that stuff and it really feels like you're really there. Oh, you better believe that people are going to be in shape. That dude, and he might still live in his mom's basement, but he's not going to be kept in sweatpants anymore. You know? Seriously.
excellent, excellent. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. I have had this Windows mixed reality set and only used it for gaming really a handful of times. Used it for other stuff, uh, and it's like I should be doing more of this too. Um, yeah, it's really cool stuff. Well, I'll let you get to Columbia and her dinner.
Yeah, can you hear her yet? I mean, she's been bitching nonstop for 10 minutes.
It's like, hey, it's time to eat. Well, enjoy the rest of your evening and the rest of your week.